Shalom, Sister Kate here with Pastor Joe.
Shalom.
We are on a trip. We are traveling together for a long distance, and we are in the middle of our country. We just found out something really interesting that relates to politics going on now and stuff that we had not known before. So this particular part of our country was settled by a wave of 10,000 Mennonites who left southern Russia in the middle 1800s. And I can only assume that there was some sort of pogrom going on against Mennonites at the time, or, maybe southern Russia had a drought at that time or something, but just a huge chunk, about a quarter of the Mennonites living in southern Russia at the time left Russia and came to America. And southern Russia, where they came from, is actually Crimea. It's where we're having the big Ukrainian-Russian fight and, standoff and dams being blown up and all sorts of stuff going on. The really interesting part about this is these Crimeans, these southern Russian Mennonites, knew how to dry land farm and also had winter wheat crops. And so when they moved here to America, they were able to put those practices in use in the area here because, one, there can be kind of stiff winters here, but also it can be dry here.
Well, it looks like Crimea.
And it looked like Crimea. It looked like where they came from, and so that's one reason they decided to settle here. And because they knew what they were doing and they were successful at the winter wheat growing, that is where it was really introducing any kind of numbers in our economy. Before that, in America, there was no winter wheat concept. And so because they were able to produce when other people weren't, and they knew how to mill their wheat and how to cook with it, and they brought that knowledge and technology with them also. They set up a flour mill. Their wheat dominated the market. It became the number one wheat, most in demand, and still is, a very large part of wheat produced in the U.S. So I just found it really interesting. One, that we didn't know, Pastor and I had never heard about this before. Two, that the Mennonite group wasn't just coming over in dribs and drabs, that they were as much an exodus from where they were to the States as other groups of people like the Irish fleeing the famine and Italians fleeing political unrest in their country coming over in a chunk. Because 10,000 people is a sizable number.
That's a lot now, let alone in the 1800s.
Right? Around the 1860s, which is when, our Civil War broke out pretty soon after that. And the Mennonites would have been peaceful. They would have been like, I don't want to get involved in this war, and would have made a political difference in a state where you have people who are pro-slavery and people who are anti-slavery. And Kansas had a pretty hot situation going on their border with Missouri during that war. And so another fact about these settlers coming was they spoke exclusively German, which is kind of interesting since they lived in Russia.
Yeah, I think that article was missing something there. You didn't come from southern Russia, which was Crimea, to here and then speak predominantly German. I think they're missing something under there.
And I think what
probably wasn't more research.
Right? I think what probably happened was Mennonitism and Amishism started in Germany, did it not?
I think so.
I'm pretty sure. Right? And so I think probably what happened was because of their religion, they spoke German.
That could be in southern Russia, and then we're...
Right, and probably knew Russian as well, but, the whole book that they're studying... Right. The whole book that they're studying was probably written in German. The lessons, the Bible reading and everything was probably done in German. And they could have been German immigrants, I suppose. But when they came to America, that kind of set them apart as far as being able to interact with the local populace. They didn't know English, but they began through their commercial exploits to learn it, and then became bilingual. And there's still a little bit of the German in the religious culture now, but the publications and things being done for the Mennonites in the area are mostly in English. The German newsletters and things are mostly for the older people in the community who still hung on to some of that phonetic root. So that was all very, very interesting. And one thing I wanted to say about it is Yah doesn't bring these little facts into your life as a whim. Knowing the basis of the Crimean, personality, however you want to phrase it wasn't just strictly one kind of people. If they had a huge Mennonite community, that would affect even the people there still today, because not all of them left Crimea. And so I don't even know. That'd be another research to look into, how many Mennonites are still in Crimea right now, and how they relate to, being Russian or having German roots, and how the Ukrainian part also weighs in on that. So I just found it all really, really interesting. In doing further research on the Mennonites in Middle America, if you go way, way, way back in their history, the whole movement started around the middle 1500s with a declaration that was made by a Swiss group who put down 7 basic tenets of Christianity, 2 or 3 of which are definitely not biblical. One of them was that Jesus was a conscientious objector, peaceful kind of guy, which completely ignores the whole thing about the merchants in the temple. And the other one was a path of non-resistance, so that when these Mennonites were attacked by Catholic kingdoms, they didn't resist at all, and many of them were slaughtered. And I'm not sure that's a biblical concept either, because the Israelites were often told to fight other cultures. So from that declaration, several Protestant arms of the church emerged, including the Hutterites and the Mennonites and the Amish. And as I said earlier in the video, the Mennonites wound up in southern Russia, but they came through Bavaria. There were a lot of southern Germans who were Mennonites, and they kept getting pushed across Europe because of their beliefs. They didn't want to fight in anybody's army, and they wanted to be living communally and not paying extra taxes, and a lot of times being tax exempt. And so when government changed, and I think there was a Frederick I, who was a king in Germany. He's a Catholic. He comes to power. He wants to, unify his country, solidify his power, and so told them, you're going to have to join the army and pay taxes. And so they flee and wind up in Russia, and then eventually in America. So the basic tenets of the Mennonite religion are very similar to the modern Israelite movement, in that we are looking at communal living, that we are trying to live by Acts 2 and be an Acts 2 church, which is also something that these Mennonites do. And that they kept an original culture where they had the German language was a huge part of the Mennonite culture, and how Israelites are trying very hard to learn Hebrew, at least be familiar with Hebrew terms and Hebrew concepts. So I just found it all really interesting, especially in view of what is happening in our own lives and the political situation with Russia versus Ukraine, seeing that the Mennonites also were in Ukraine, had Ukrainian Mennonites that moved to Russia, and then to America. So there could be some underlying, not just political reasons for this huge fight, but maybe some religious stuff that happened to ancestors that kind of fuels their view of what's happening now. All right, we're gonna continue what we're doing. Bless you all. Thanks for watching the video. Shalom.